GIRLSCAMP, it's Girls Camp.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Girls Camp podcast. I'm your host, Haley Rawl. I have found myself already in the Halloween season. It came up quick, but I'm very happy to be here. I love Halloween. I love fall. I love a pumpkin patch. I love a fall treat. I love, to an extent, a ghost story, a scary story, but I felt like a good way to soft launch into the season was doing a prompt about good ghosts. I've done ghost stories on the podcast before, and I feel like there's always one or two that end up being very heartwarming, that end up being like a helpful, friendly ghost of some sort. So I decided to do an episode dedicated to good ghosts and good paranormal experiences alone. So if you are the scared sort that has to avoid scary stories, which I can understand, I'm actually debating even doing scary stories this month. But I don't know, I probably will. I love being able to have like the religious take on scary stories specifically. So I probably still will, but I'm trying to keep things as lighthearted and uplifting as possible right now. Part of the reason I had this idea is because I've been meaning to tell you all about this really small thing that has happened since my dad died. And it is a very small thing, and I'm sure there's lots of explanations for it, but it means something to me. I swear this didn't happen before he died, but I realized pretty soon after he died, my place for processing grief and really thinking about him ended up being time and time again while I was driving in my car. It was just a time where it was either quiet, or oftentimes I would listen to a playlist I made of some of his favorite music. That was a way that we connected with each other, was through music. And it was kind of the only time that I was like really sitting and thinking. So I would often be thinking about my dad. And soon after he died, there was this one day where I was driving alone. Nobody was in the passenger seat. And the car started dinging at me, like the light that says like, put on your seatbelt for the person in the passenger seat. And I like checked the seat. There was nothing on it. There was no bags, nothing, like literally completely empty. And it kept dinging. And I was like, this is so annoying. And then it kind of hit me. And I thought, what if this is the presence of my dad? And ever since that happened, whenever it dings at me and there's nothing there, I like to think of it as a reminder to really like check in with my dad. And I've started imagining him not only as the person he was when he died, but I've imagined like what it would be like to have him next to me as a teenager, when he was a teenager, or when he was my age, a young adult. And it kind of just gives me the space to think about him, think about my own life and what he might say in response to like the things on my mind and on my heart. And so it's just been a really special little reminder of him instead of something incredibly annoying. Like I really like it now when that starts dinging at me, because I'm like, oh yeah, I want to think about my dad and imagine that my dad is just here driving around with me. One more good ghost story that means so much to me before I dive into all of yours. My aunt, so my dad's sister, she knew that my Grammy was pretty close to dying. And this happened almost exactly a year ago. We just had her 1-year death anniversary last month. She knew that my Grammy was pretty close to dying. And this is my dad's sister. So it was, my dad's sister is not connected really much at all to my Grammy because that's my mom's mom. But she obviously like knew who my Grammy was. And she had a dream. And in this dream, she was like on a street or something, and she pulled up and she saw that there was a building, and she could see on the second floor of the building, she could see it looked like a restaurant or something that had kind of been like, was either closed up or was just starting to open. And she saw a figure that she knew was my dad, and he pulled out a chair for himself, and then he set another chair, like took a chair down and set it beside him, as if he was like expecting someone. And then she found out the next day that my Grammy had died. And it's just so special to me to think about my dad and my Grammy not only maybe being together somewhere, somehow after this life, just them in particular, because my parents got divorced when I was 13. And so, there was that to deal with as far as like relationships with his in-laws. But I always remember my dad speaking so highly of my Grammy and my Grammy speaking so highly of my dad. And I think they had this really special bond. And they're the two closest people to me I know that have died. And so to think about them like being together, my dad like preparing the way for her, is just such a special and heartwarming thing for me to think about. As I was preparing this episode, I was reading through all of these stories, and they're so beautiful, and I always appreciate you writing in your stories, but these particularly, so many of these feel so sacred, and so I'm just grateful that you've shared those with me and that I now get to share those with girls camp, with the campers. But I was thinking, there's got to be something to this. There's got to be something to spirits and ghosts and connections beyond the veil, as I would say in Mormonism. Is that just a Mormon thing? Beyond death is what I'm trying to say. We would say in Mormonism, like beyond the veil, like the veil of death, or like through the veil. Maybe that's just religious language, or maybe everyone says stuff like that. Sometimes I forget that things that feel so integral to my own language are actually Mormon things. But I was like, I'm just going to look this up briefly and see if there's any maybe niche, deep cut sciences that are like addressing this type of thing. And pretty quickly, Google shut me down. And I was like, you know what? Fuck that. I am going to set the skeptical part of me aside for this episode. Maybe we will revisit the science of ghost encounters at some point, but today is not that day, because I am going to let a girl live, and that girl is me, and I just want to appreciate these stories without trying to figure out why these things happen, if there's any proof, blah, blah, fucking blah. We're just going to let these good ghost stories be what they are and take them at face value. Story number 1, and trigger warning on this one. It's about domestic violence. So you can just maybe skip ahead a few minutes. It won't be too long if you don't want to hear this one. I was trying to leave my abusive ex-husband, who had already tried to shoot me once when I tried to leave. I prayed to know when a safe time would be, and I had an answer that I would know the exact right time because there would be a distinct sign. For weeks, I wondered and waited, and finally one night I came home from a girls' night, and my ex was passed out drunk on the living room floor, as per usual, and I went upstairs to get ready for bed. Mid flossing my teeth, I felt the energy shift in the room, like when someone opens a door in the house and another one opens. Then, as clear as day, the voice of my recently deceased mom sternly told me, "Allie, you need to leave right now." So without hesitation, I did, and I never went back. God knew I would trust the voice of my mom, and she saved my life. I didn't actually think I would cry, because I didn't actually think I would cry, but we might be crying together. So pull out the tissues if you are a sentimental person. Something about it just like being the mom in such a pivotal moment when she probably wanted her mom to be alive. But her mom being able to be the person to like give her that courage in like such a scary moment is so beautiful. I'm in my luteal phase. I'm not trying to like, it's fine to cry. It's okay to cry. But I am in my luteal phase, which makes me very teary and very weepy. So the timing might not be the best on this, but we'll see if I can carry through. Okay, this one is less sentimental, but totally fascinating. I went to Scotland in 2016 and specifically chose this one Airbnb because it was this old farmhouse and it looked haunted. I was in room 5 out of 6, and it had some of the original furniture, including one of those 4 poster beds with curtains that close all the way around it. I've always wanted to sleep in one of those. I closed up the bed and fell asleep. I woke up and the curtain on my side of the bed was pulled open, and a man with long hair, a long beard, and a full-on Highland kilt was standing over me, staring at me. He looked so real I could touch him. I was startled because of a random stranger standing over me, so I rolled across the bed and ran and turned on the lights. There was no light that night from the moon coming through the window, so I wasn't hallucinating. I looked out the window because there was a dog barking outside, and I honestly chalked it all up to jet lag. The next morning, I asked the lady who ran the Airbnb if the house was haunted, and without a beat, she said, "Which one did you see?" So we talked for a while, and she showed me this really old family book that had a painting of the original builder of the house, her ancestor, and it was the man I had seen. She told me he was friendly, and in room 5, he's usually just curious who is sleeping in his old room. I asked to see their dog afterwards, and she laughed and said, "We don't have a dog, dear. That's his dog." This is a phenomenal premise for a movie. It feels like such a wholesome, happy ghost story, and this makes me want to go to Scotland so bad. I have a friend who recently went on like a Scotland-Ireland trip with a girlfriend of hers, and I was just like eating up the content. They went to a farm where they were able to like interact with sheep, and they were in these pubs, and they actually stayed in this cool old Airbnb. It all just felt very dreamy and idyllic. And I am not one to seek out a haunted looking house, particularly a haunted looking Airbnb, if I know I'm going to sleep there. But honestly, I kind of want to meet this guy because he sounds really cool. And I love so much that the response of the owner was like, "Oh, which one did you see? Oh, you're fine. That's just his old room. He's always going to check in." Just this guy like so attached to his home that he just wants to know what the going-ons are. I can respect that. In 2018, my daughter was pregnant with her second child, and she had to be induced at 32 weeks due to severe preeclampsia. I had to be induced at, was I 32? 34 weeks because of preeclampsia also. Baby girl was born healthy considering she was 8 weeks early and weighing only 4 pounds, but we were looking at a long stay in the NICU. At 2 weeks old, baby girl developed hydrocephalus. Her NICU team watched her a few days and called in the head of pediatric neurology from the local children's hospital. They wanted to place a shunt in her brain permanently to drain the excess spinal fluid into her abdomen. As she grew, she would need this replaced several times, so this meant multiple brain surgeries for her future. Every day, the doctor would examine the baby to see if she was getting worse to warrant the surgery. It was a day-by-day decision. My son-in-law had to work, so I went with my daughter every day to the hospital so she was never alone during these exams and doctor visits. Day after day, we visited, but our time was never long enough with our sweet baby that was fighting through this diagnosis. We never liked the idea of our baby there alone without anyone holding her. One day, we came for our daily visit. As I turned into her room, I felt and saw with my spirit a circle of angels surrounding her bassinet while she lay there hooked up to monitors and feeding tubes. It was almost as if I caught these angels lingering a little longer than they were supposed to be. It was the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. Not bright lights or flowing robes or anything like that. More a sense of peace and maternal concern and comfort for our baby girl. I wonder if they were our ancestors or grandmothers gone before us. Whoever they were, they brought nothing but love and peace. That vision I had of the angels is so strong, it makes me cry every time I think of it or try to describe it to anyone. I left the church in 2020, and I don't believe any of it, but I can never deny what I saw in the hospital room that day. Baby did not end up needing the shunt, and her hydrocephalus cleared up on its own. When she was 2 years old, she got the final all clear from the neurologist. She's now a spunky little 7-year-old who loves to dance, and we couldn't love her any more than we do, and I often wonder if her angels are still close by. Signed, Grammy Lacey. Thank you, Grammy Lacey, for that. I have such a tender spot and tender feelings around the NICU because both of my daughters spent 3.5 weeks in the NICU after they were born at 34 weeks. They were in the NICU just because they needed help like adjusting to life outside the womb. They were so tiny. One of them was just under 4 pounds. One of them was just over 4 pounds. And the NICU is like, it's just such a tender place, obviously. Just babies who are, working through stuff they're so tiny and they're so fragile. And the nurses there are true angels to me. I was actually just talking to one of our NICU nurses, just barely over DM on Instagram. And it makes me really emotional because as a mom, it's so hard to leave your child in the NICU, but you have to. And it's just really sad. It's really sad and really hard to leave them alone. And, I was there as much as I could be, but to think that there might be some sort of help from the other side in taking care of those babies doesn't surprise me. If there are angels, I think that is one of the places they would be. I was in a rollover car accident in the canyon late one winter night. I was in the passenger seat. We landed upside down and I was trapped in the car, but everyone else managed to get out. The lights started on fire near my face, so I began to panic. Someone whose face I can't describe crawled into the car, told me I'd be okay, and unbuckled me so I was able to crawl out, but I found no one. My friends who'd been in the car with me were the only ones on the scene, and they were on the other side of the car together. I don't believe much in the church, but I feel strongly that this was a spirit guide or caretaker who stepped in to protect me. Another place I think angels and guardians, spirit guides, caretakers would be is helping people through accidents like that. And I'm so glad you had that, because car accidents, I feel like they're underratedly scary. I have never been in a significant accident myself. I literally had like the most mild car accident situation when I was in college. I got T-boned, but I was in a neighborhood. I was going so slow. The car that hit me was going really slow too, but it was a big truck, and it was so frightening. I remember thinking like, oh my gosh, like I can't even imagine what a full-fledged car accident would be like. And so, yeah, I'm glad that you had that help and assistance from whoever it was, maybe just a friendly, ghostly stranger. One time I was running with my college roommate. Oh, man. One time I was running with my college roommate and she had run ahead a bit. As I watched her running, I saw a man running alongside her, but he wasn't all there. It could be considered spooky, but my heart filled with warmth as I watched them run together. And without knowing why, I started to cry. Her dad had died when she was in high school, and I had never seen a picture of him or anything. I caught up with her and told her about it. She showed me a picture of her dad and asked if it was him. It was. She then told me that when he got sick, he would ride his electric wheelchair behind her when she went running at night in high school. She said she would have given anything for him to run alongside her. We both hugged and cried for a long time. Very heartwarming. Dead dad ones. And not only dead dad ones, but sorry, I don't want my voice to be like so gravelly and crying. Not only just dead dad ones, but sweet, sweet high school dads that are so involved with their daughters. I just saw a video right before I started recording on Instagram about a girl dad who was at his daughter's 16th birthday party. And he was just talking about how, everyone's going to tell you it happened so fast and enjoy it while you have it with young kids. But he was like, no, for real. Like it really does. And I always send those to Bentley because he is such a sweet, sweet girl dad. And I'm just so excited to watch his relationship with our daughters continue to grow. It really heals a big part of me that didn't have closeness with my dad through a lot of my life as, even as a kid in my adolescence. I'm just so excited for my daughters to have that from their dad. Okay, this one is oomph because I feel like it gives me some sort of proof that heaven is real and a pre-mortal life was/is real. But it's the most incredible thing that's ever happened. My husband's dad passed away while he was serving his mission back in 2014. It was unexpected and something that he still struggles with immensely. Fast forward to the end of 2018, and we have our first child, a boy, who we named after my husband's dad. Now, my husband's dad had endured a lot in his life. Hit by a car twice, 3 times in total. The last hit was how he passed. 2 strokes, having to relearn how to walk, talk, etc. Because of all of his physical impairments, he didn't enjoy having his photo taken. So my husband only has a select few pictures of him and he doesn't display them, but keeps them in a tote at the top of our closet. As our first son grew, we would notice him having conversations and laughing in his bed in the middle of the night. And when we would ask him about it, he would say he was talking to the man. It really freaked us out. Legit thought our house was haunted. So one day when he was about 4, I was looking through some photos and passed one of my husband's dad. My son turns to me and goes, "Hey, it's the man." I was confused at first, but then he said, "Yeah, I was with him before I came out of your tummy. He told me I was going to have the best mom and dad, and I was so lucky. He told me I can call him grandpa and that he'll always be with me." I immediately started sobbing. My husband got home from work and our son told him the same thing. Even opening the photo album and pointing out the man, we may have our fierce doubts about the church, but guardian angels have become a solid belief for us since then. Yeah, I bet. Oh my gosh, how crazy. Probably also, the most important thing is how special that is, but also probably a relief because the man is very scary and foreboding until you figured out who the man was. Also, cue Taylor Swift's The Man song. I have listened to the first 3 songs, I think now, of Taylor Swift's new album. It came out last night at 10 p.m. Mountain Time. I've said it once, and I'll say it again. I don't consider myself a Swiftie, but I consider myself an enjoyer of Taylor Swift's music, of the music of hers that I know, and a Swift ally, and also one who has FOMO when things in the Swift universe are happening because it all looks really fun and exciting. So I'm enjoying listening to this album. I really like it. It feels fun, more upbeat than her previous Tortured Poets department, but I'm only on, like I said, track 3 or 4. I do have Opalite already stuck in my head. So it's probably a good sign because I only listened to it one time. Next one. I was newly postpartum and had hemorrhaged during my birth, so I was very, very weak. I had so much support and help, but eventually my husband had to go back to work. And in between other help, I was alone one day and I had to go up the stairs with my baby and I was crying because I didn't think I could do it. But as I started going up, I felt my grandpa holding me up so I could make it. I will never forget it. Postpartum is such a tender, vulnerable time. That's the word I was looking for. It's vulnerable spiritually, mentally, physically, in all the ways. And you need so much help. And so to have help from the other side, from a grandpa, nonetheless, is really so sweet. I had a close relationship with my grandmother, and she died several years ago. I went to the temple to ask if I should marry someone that I had been dating, and I am not joking when I say I heard her voice like she was standing next to me as I was asking if I should marry him. She said no. Then she said my name. Now I consider myself ex-Mormon, so the whole experience is a little confusing for me with the temple aspect of it all, but I will always hold that experience as a special place in my heart that my grandma was there for me when I needed her. I didn't get an answer from God, but grandma came to the rescue. Haha. 2 things here. Number 1, the grandma thing. There were a lot of stories about grandparents generally, but a lot of stories about grandmas and great-great-grandmas. And it kind of struck me as I was reading through so many stories about grandmothers kind of showing up in these ways and offering guidance. I was thinking about how, okay, your grandma at one point had the beginnings of you inside her body. Well, this only works for maternal grandmas. I looked this up because when a baby is still a fetus, that baby has the beginnings of what will be their eggs one day. So like when my mom was in my Grammy's stomach, my mom already had inside of her the egg that would eventually become me. So at one point I was inside, or the very beginnings of me were actually inside my Grammy. And I guess it's a little different with the non-maternal side, but still you think about like my grandma, my dad's mom, was carrying my dad, who also was carrying the DNA, who became me. But on the maternal side, it just feels, it's literal. It's like I lived inside my grandma's body, sort of. And it got me thinking about how in this instance, like the grandma shows up and offers this guidance. And it makes so much sense because of like how connected we are through even our bodies in the lineage of women, and how connected we are through DNA, and how it's almost like you talking to yourself because that is part of you, the women that came before you. It's just really, really cool to think about how strong lineage and ancestry is when you think about it from that perspective. I'm also thinking about the temple side of this because this person said like kind of confusing because I was in the temple. But I think that it makes so much sense that for people who grew up in a Mormon context, there are going to be spiritual, memorable experiences that might happen in the temple or that might happen at a Mormon church, or for people who grew up Catholic, that they're going to happen in a Catholic context, because those are the contexts that a lot of times we were like open to this sort of thing. We were asking these questions. We were listening in a different way. And so whether it's like paranormal or ghost stuff or just experiences you consider spiritual, I think that for me, that's how I separate those things, is like it had nothing actually to do with the temple. That was just a place that you were listening and able to get that message from your grandma. Next one. And this one talks about being in an eating disorder facility. There's no details or anything about the actual eating disorder, but I just wanted to share that up front. I had to stay at a residential eating disorder facility for several months. It was very difficult, but so helpful in my healing journey. My first few months there were very difficult, and I felt very alone. We had a specific nurse there who claimed she could see ghosts. She told us the facility had 3 ghosts that lived there. One in particular she said was mischievous. I never believed her, but soon after, things of mine started to go missing. I remember my AirPods, which I always kept in my room, went missing for a few days and then returned one day under my pillow. I also had a small trinket that I brought from home and kept safely stashed away with my journals and books. I swear to God, I had never moved it. I started to see the trinket. It was a little wooden doll, like the size of a finger, sitting in the halls, on the floor, far from my room, in my laundry, under my pillow, with my toiletries, and one time even in my shoe. I always returned it to my basket that held my books. The facility was always on lockdown. Our rooms were locked the second we got up in the morning. Absolutely no one could have known about this doll or moved it. It felt oddly comforting. Nothing paranormal had ever happened to me, and it felt rather comforting to maybe have a ghost looking after me and remembering not to take everything so seriously. We love a mischievous ghost who's maybe just spicing up your day a little bit and making you feel less alone. And exactly like you said, just reminding you that maybe it's not all so serious. I think mischievous ghosts are really fun, like not scary, trying to scare you, but just like having a little fun with you. I wouldn't mind a mischievous ghost, I don't think. I actually also feel like I used to be really, really scared of ghosts and anything paranormal. There was a couple of years where if Bentley was ever out of town, I literally couldn't sleep. I would have to turn on the lights, and I was really scared. It wasn't of like an intruder, it was of ghosts, which felt extra scary because, I mean, I could lock all my doors, but that ain't gonna stop a ghost. So I had a lot of fear around it, and I actually think, which is something I've been thinking a lot about, I think a lot of times certain fears are actually just connected to general anxiety. And as I've managed my anxiety and become a less anxious person, I'm not really scared anymore of a lot of things that used to really scare me. I used to be really scared of going on airplanes. I used to be really scared of ghosts. I used to be really scared of going on roller coasters. And as I've addressed my anxiety, a lot of those fears have gone away. I'm sure there's there's legitimate phobias and things like that, but that's just something I've personally noticed. And actually, earlier this year, I found myself getting really scared to fly again. And I took a flight and I was like having a panic attack and feeling really scared. And it was a good signal to me of, I just have probably a lot of anxiety that I'm not addressing right now. And this is how it's showing up. And sure enough, I feel like it was less about flight anxiety and more just about like anxiety unaddressed already inside of me. Early into my mission, my great-grandpa passed away. My mom sent me a quick email before I went to bed one night, letting me know his health was declining and he may not make it through the night. In the middle of the night, I woke up to a very bright white light shining through my bedroom window. Bright white light. Sounds like a Dr. Seuss book. All I remember is thinking it's 2:30 in the morning before quickly falling asleep again. The next morning, I woke up, remembered the experience, and opened the blinds to see what angle the road was at. I realized it would have been impossible for that bright white light to be car headlights. We also lived in the middle of nowhere, Texas. I emailed my mom asking about my grandpa, and she told me he had passed at 2:30 a.m. The same time I saw that light, I knew it was him. He had a list of people he wanted to say goodbye to, and I was the one person that wasn't checked off that list. So I think he was just making a little pit stop before heading off to wherever or whatever is next. Since leaving the church, I haven't really tried to put an explanation into what exactly that was. I just let it be. Some magic and love from my great grandpa. That's really cute. He's like, wait a second. I need to head out to rural Texas before I go anywhere else because I haven't had a chance to say goodbye to my little missionary granddaughter. Did they specify? Grandchild. I don't know if this was a granddaughter or grandson, but I'm so happy you had that. It feels like extra special, I think, to feel like you've been thought of by someone who died, has just died, or is like in the process of dying, to feel like you were such an important person to your great grandpa and they were making sure that they checked all the boxes of the people they loved the most. My husband and I's first cat was named Chonga, like the second half of Chimichanga. He was an elderly cat when we adopted him, and he was the sweetest, most perfect boy. We lost him in December of 2022, 1 week after we moved into our first home. We have these electronic candles that we use in the windows at Christmas, but they've been broken for a while. Every once in a while, one will light up, and we have a deep feeling that it is Chonga watching over us or checking in. Pet loss is one of the hardest things I've ever endured, and the occasional candle flicker gives me hope that he's not gone and his energy and love still exists enough to power a broken candle. What a sweet way for Chonga to show back up, and at Christmas time. I have been thinking randomly, not a lot, but a bit about pets and about animals, and I think I've said this on the podcast before, but I have a pretty poor track record with pets. Like growing up, we had hamsters and guinea pigs and stuff like that, but I feel like those animals, not that it's impossible, but maybe a bit harder to bond with. And most of my associations with those animals were just having to clean out their cages, which I hated. I got given a hermit crab for my birthday, and my mom didn't know that I was really, really afraid of crabs. So I had to pretend that I liked it. It was at the time when they would sell those at the mall, and they would have like the painted shells, and you could just buy like a little hermit crab in a cage. And one day my hermit crab got out of its shell, got out of its cage, and was on the bath mat when I got out of the bath. Hermit crab out of its shell, which still gives me the heebie-jeebies to this day. And then it started molting, losing its legs, which I didn't realize was a thing. The whole thing was very horrifying to me. Then we had a dog. We got a dog. We were so excited. We had begged and begged and begged to get a dog. He was a rat terrier named Rocky, very sweet boy. We got him, and I was so excited. I was going to bring him to school because I was giving a presentation on where the red fern grows. That book is diabolical. If you've read it, you know it's the saddest book of all time. It's about a dog who, spoiler alert, dies. And I was so excited to bring my dog to school. I had gotten permission to bring Rocky to school for my book report on where the red fern grows. Rocky was only a couple months old. He managed to dig his way out from underneath our fence, and he ran into the road and got hit by a car, and he died a couple days before my book report. So that was ironic and absolutely devastating. And my mom was just like, I can't do any more dogs. So anyway, I didn't really grow up with a family dog. And I know that that's such a treasured experience for so many people, having animals in their life in that way. And it's something I really want for my daughters. I just am not quite ready yet because I feel very much at capacity with creatures to care for with my daughters being the creatures in question. But I hope to, find the right animal to bring into our family when we are all ready for it, because I do think they just offer something so special, especially for children. And I think I've talked about this on the podcast before, but my dad, the last being he was with before he died was a dog named Max. My dad and stepmom have a sweet little dog named Max. He looks a lot like Max from The Grinch. And my dad had taken him on a walk right before he had his heart attack. So I'm so happy that my dad wasn't alone and that he had sweet little Max with him. My husband's grandparents were both very influential in his life. When I was very first pregnant with our son, we told his grandma because we knew she didn't have much time left. We told her that if we had a boy, we were going to name him after his grandpa, who had passed away unexpectedly about 10 years prior. When she was in her final days, she gave me a big hug as we left the hospital and said, "I'm praying for your Jay." We didn't know yet if we were having a boy or a girl, and we weren't going to find out until birth. Also, I took this as her calling our baby Jay, not that she wanted us to have a boy. She soon passed away and we delivered our baby boy Jay about 6 months later. The crazy part is soon after we came home from the hospital, we started getting very vibrant blue jays in our yard, 2 of them at a time, often. And I just knew that it was my husband's grandparents coming to watch over us. They would land on my car, sit on the fence by our home, and I would see them in different places while traveling. I literally had never seen a blue jay more than a handful of times, and after our son was born, they seemed to follow us everywhere. We still see them all of the time, and our son also looks for them and points them out now. Pretty special. So freaking special. And what a cute name. I love that. I'm watching Modern Family right now, and the grandpa is named Jay. That's married to Gloria, the like much younger, spicy Latina woman. My sister is pregnant right now with a boy, and they're having a really hard time coming up with a name for him. I think boy names are really hard. So I'm always like keeping a lookout for names. And I love a name that is meaningful, that has like some tie, especially if it's to ancestry. So I just think that's so, so beautiful. My nephew, my older sister's son, he was born almost, not exactly, but he was born about a year after my dad died. And so my sister found out she was pregnant after my dad died, and it was all really hard, as you can imagine, but she named him Walker because that's our maiden name, my dad's last name. And it's just really meaningful to have him like death and then new life, and to kind of have him carry on that name and that legacy. So I can totally understand how special that is. And I love that blue jay thing too. Now I want to go bird watching. I do notice birds here or there, mainly in like, I see them in really beautiful flocks, and I love the way they move in flocks, but I need to get more curious about birds and start paying attention to birds. So thank you for that reminder. Also, very much on a different note of birds, but isn't there a horror movie called The Birds that's about a bird attack? I feel like this is a classic horror movie that I've heard about that I'm curious about. I actually want to watch more classic horror movies this spooky season because they tend to be less scary when they're older. And one about birds, it just doesn't sound that scary to me. But maybe I will watch it and I will return and report. When I was around 4 or 5 years old, I wanted to go play with my next door neighbor on a Sunday after church. My mom told me no because it was a Sunday, so of course I was mad and I went and hid in our neighbor's garage. I was in there for a while, and I remember my mom and sister coming into the garage looking for me, but I hid too well. Apparently, my mom had the whole ward out looking for me, LOL. Anyway, after a while, I was bored and left the garage. And then I saw my oldest sister, who had died a few years before I was born. She was in a blue dress and looked so beautiful and bright. She reached her hand out to me and said, "It's time to go home." And she walked me to my mom right as she finished praying that I would show up immediately before she called the cops. That memory has always been so vivid and made me believe that family members who have passed on are always looking out for us. Apparently, my 2 other sisters have had positive experiences with our dead sister as well. I don't want this to come across the wrong way of like, oh, it's so lucky to have a family member die, because obviously not in any way, shape, or form. But reading these stories and reflecting on my own experience with grief and death in my close family, which is fairly new to me, as of my dad dying a couple years ago now and my Grammy dying, there is something like the silver lining, I guess, of death is that I do feel like it connects you to spirituality in a different way, or at least it has for me, where like it's almost like you're more attentive to spiritual signs of any sort. And whenever you think about a loved one who has passed on, it makes you reflect on the important things in life, on the love that like binds us, the love that binds families and friends, and how powerful of a force that is. It's just all hit me in a different way than before I experienced the death of a close loved one. And I think there's just a way that, yeah, it kind of opens up this door, I think. And thinking about people who have experienced death so young, so close at hand, or, you know, had it part of their family that they had a sibling who had died even before they were born. It's something so foreign to me because I really didn't even fully comprehend that death was a reality until pretty fucking recently. And I have so much sympathy for it because I can only imagine at such a young age trying to grapple with something like that. But it also feels like there's this openness to this other side of things, like kind of like a grander perspective, maybe in a way. Again, if that's not your experience with death, also, I don't want to speak for everyone. But yeah, this story reminded me of that. And I just love an older sister, like, okay, it's time to go home now. Let me make sure you get home before the cops get called. Mom's saying a prayer right now, so let me help her out. I live in the house my grandparents built, the same place where they and even my great-grandparents passed away. So the house has always felt really full of them in a comforting way. I'll get little reminders all the time, like hearing footsteps down the hallway when nobody's there, or catching the smell of how the house used to be before my husband and I remodeled it. And they definitely made their opinions known during that remodel. One time, while we were debating some design choices, a pair of scissors literally flew off a level surface across the room. That felt like a pretty strong vote. But the most heartwarming moment happened one morning before work. I was awake, just lying there with my eyes closed for a few more minutes, when I heard my grandma's voice right by my ear. Clear as day, she said, "Get up or you're going to be late for work." It was so her and so real that I got right up, just like I would have when she was alive. Even though I had plenty of time to get ready, it seemed unwise to argue with a ghost. Sometimes she shows up in dreams that feel like gifts. I'll wake up with this deep sense of peace and happiness that stays with me all day. Those moments make me feel like she's watching over me. I love that, and I especially love the pair of scissors flying off the level surface across the room. I've always said that I'm happy to live in a new build, because, I mean, who knows what happened on this land? There could be haunting of the land upon which my house was built, but a new build doesn't feel haunted because we're the first ones to live here. But would be really nice to have a third-party vote on design decisions. Bentley and I could very much do with someone chiming in, especially from the dead, because we have found ourselves in like a years-long stalemate. It's not even that we're arguing about what to do with the house, but we both have ideas, and then we'll be like, let's do this. And he's like, well, let's do this. And then we just like bottleneck each other. We've tried all sorts of ways to get around it. And yeah, anyway, we just have so many rooms and things we want to do in our house that we just like can't quite get to doing. So I would love if a grandma or grandpa or great grandma pointed some scissors somewhere and said, just do this thing. And then we would just be like, okay, there you have it. Rose is a great-great-grandmother, a Mormon ancestor, born on the plains as her family traveled to Utah. Oh, crazy. She came to my mind again and again for months. I'd catch glimpses of her when I looked in the mirror. The next time I was in Utah, I decided to visit her grave in American Fork. When I got to the cemetery, instead of pushing the power button to turn off the rental car, I accidentally pushed the radio button, and at full volume, Lizzo sang, "It's About Damn Time." It felt like a little message from my pioneer grandmother, and I laughed until I cried. I sat by her grave and asked her if it was okay to be a pioneer in my own way out of the church. She comforted my heart and gave me all the motherly encouragement I could soak up. A pioneer great-great-grandma speaking through a Lizzo song is absolutely everything. It's about damn time. She's like, okay, I've been waiting for you. And I love being able to reconcile that pioneer heritage, especially. It's something I've talked about a lot myself. I also have a goal to visit my dad's grave more often and my Grammy's grave. I actually haven't even visited my Grammy's grave. My dad's grave is closer to me and I have visited. It feels really hard and like confronting to my grief, which is why I want to do it. And I think that graveyards and cemeteries, I mean, it's spooky season, so I guess this also fits for an October theme, but I do feel like it feels like a sacred space to me now as someone who doesn't attend church or see church buildings really as a sacred space or temples or whatever. It feels like a place to go and sit and think. And even I've done a lot of exploring around the cemetery where my dad is buried and just like looking at people's names and the things that they've chosen to, or that their family has chosen to put on their gravestones, the mementos that people leave for their loved ones who have died. It always feels, very spiritual and very sacred. And as I'm trying to implement more spirituality and rituals into my routine, I really want to visit my dad's grave once a week. So I'm saying it here so I can hold myself accountable. I've just felt a call to do that for a while, and it's something I've been pushing off, but this has motivated me. And my dad is probably like, it's about damn time. I wonder what song he would speak to me through. I'll think on that because I would love to think of a lyric that he would be saying to me when I get back to his grave, because it's been a couple months. Okay, this next one feels somewhat related. It's about family history work. This person said, I had a very vivid dream, but it felt so real. I was heavily focusing on family history work, and I could not find my great-grandmother's grandmother's information. I had been spending tons of time on this. I had a very vivid dream of my great-grandmother, who I knew, and was the sweetest lady ever. In my dream, we were at a funeral for my grandmother. I was sitting with her, asking her tons of questions. She was just smiling and playing with my toddler, holding him, tickling him to make him smile. After I stopped asking genealogy questions, she hugged me and said, honey, just worry about the now. After I left the church, it makes me sad that I spent all that time, even though it's cool to know. The temple isn't even real. I did stop trying to look for that information after that and took a break from temple work. She was a wise woman. Love a Mormon grandma being like, you actually don't have to worry that much about the details of family history work. Which, to this person's point, I actually think family history work is like one of the coolest things that the church promoted. I think it's really cool to learn information and to connect those family trees, not because we need to go do baptisms for the dead for them and do all the temple proxy work, but because it's powerful information to know about like the story of you. But I love that this grandma was like, just worry about now. I promise it's going to be okay. I had a childhood dog who lived until he was 13 and a half years old. He died 2 years ago, but when we had him, he would always crack open the door to walk into my room, and he'd sleep with me every night. After he died, I would always see my door open like how it used to for him to walk in. I went to a medium in South Jordan and asked about my dog Marley, and he brought up how he still opens the door to my room. He watches over me and protects me. That was the story that sparked, well, I've been sort of feeling this way, but I was just thinking about how lovely and wonderful it is to have a pet, especially as a kid growing up, and how a pet can comfort and be there for you in ways that sometimes humans just can't. And I love that Marley is doing that even still, even after his 13 and a half years on Earth. This is the last one I'm going to read, and we see a theme emerging here as to what the grandparents have to tell us, especially us ex-Mormons, it seems. While I was on my mission, we had an investigator who was really just a lonely older woman. She was 0% interested in the church, but 100% interested in having two friendly young women come over to visit and help her with small jobs here and there. If that ain't the story of my mission, 1000%. So many sweet, friendly, funny old women that we would just like go visit and chat with and help clean their house and do random things with them and for them. And then we would always be like, let's talk about, whatever, try and get a lesson in there, trying to convince ourselves that they gave a shit, but they didn't. I was exactly obedient as a missionary. Yes, this caused mental health issues later on, LOL. So every time we would visit, I would try to cram in part of a lesson so that we could A, count it on our report to our leaders, and B, not go to hell for lollygagging. Real. Anyway, one time I was trying to force one of these lessons into our visit, and this sweet lady was basically trying to shoot me up. Shoot me up. She said that she wasn't interested a few times, but my persistent and obedient self just couldn't let it go. I don't know what she means by shoot me up. Anyway, out of nowhere, the radio turned on in the other room. It was blasting a Neil Diamond song that I haven't heard on the radio before or since. It was my grandpa's favorite song. He died when I was 12, and my family listened to this Neil Diamond album often when we talked about grandpa. He wasn't a serious guy, and although he was active in the church, he really believed in respecting other people's beliefs and focusing on relationships with people rather than trying to push an agenda. I could feel him in the room with us, almost like a gentle but loving rebuke and reminder to not be a crazy missionary. I immediately realized my mistake and apologized to that sweet woman. I've since left the church, but I believe in eternal families partly because of that experience. Another grandparent being like, girl, I'm on the other side now, and I promise you, you can let it go. You can just focus on now and focus on a sweet connection with this sweet lady, and that's probably what she needs more than anything else. I think that's so beautiful, and I love this speaking through songs. I have not got my soda of the day. If you followed my very brief saga of trying to go off Diet Coke, lasted about a week. I am very much back on and very unapologetic about it, but I need to go get my soda for the day after this before I have my lunch, and I'm going to listen to my dad's playlist that I made right after he died. He had phenomenal taste in music, I think, probably because he basically passed on his taste almost exactly to me, so it's basically my taste in music, but I'm going to listen to music and think about him. Thank you, again, truly, for writing these in. This feels like a really special, important episode for me in a way that I didn't imagine it would. So I really appreciate that. One other thing I did want to say, I'm doing a full deep dive on my Patreon. I'm actually recording it today, but it will be live by the time this episode goes live, on the death of the prophet, the Mormon prophet, Russell M. Nelson. He died last Sunday. He died, found out that news in the morning, and then pretty immediately after the shooting happened at the LDS church. I have a lot of thoughts and feelings on both of those things that I am going to be sharing at length in that Patreon episode. But I was talking with friends about the death of Russell M. Nelson, and again, lots of complicated feelings. But I was thinking, like, you know what? I really hope that wherever that man is now, he is taking a big breath of relief and realizing that it's just not so complicated after all. And probably in my current framework, he is now just a floating bit of energy that's back out into like the cosmic pool of energy from whence we came and which we are all a part of. But if there is any, still soul there, whatever, I hope that he's like, oh man, it just really wasn't that complicated after all. And so to feel like these grandparent ghosts are trying to tell you that, the people who wrote in these stories, and now I'm hearing that through you, that just feels like a very good message and a very good reminder that I just think it's probably all a lot less complicated than we think it is when it comes to all the things that we have to do or are supposed to do in order to make it a certain place or be good people or whatever. So, amen in the name of all of these people and pets that you wrote in about. I dedicate this episode to them. Thanks so much for listening, and maybe some more spooky, scary stories to come. Stay tuned. Talk to you next week. Bye.
GIRLS